Hey, magical experimenters, Taylor Ellwood here, and welcome to the latest show. And as always, if you're new to this channel, go ahead and click the subscribe button, and otherwise click the bell notification so you get notified when I go live. And if you're a frequent flyer here, go ahead and like and comment on this video because that just makes these things more fun. So tonight's video is around the question of why build relationship with spirit. And this video came about because I had a friend of mine who commented on something either I'd written or someone else had written, but basically it was a really interesting comment. So I decided I told him I'd do a video about it. Here's the comment. He said, for example, I've met many who have a regular practice and that's enough. But what if they actually had an end goal? They wouldn't know how to frame that desire in a sensible way. Working with spirits is cool, but why? Why go to the effort of building a relationship through your own system or a pre-established one when you can get results through the gallery of magic or something similar? What is the actual benefit? And that's what no one is answering. So I get it. I mean, I think it's actually a really good comment. If we look at, oh, thank you. I'm glad you like my videos. Anyway, if we look at how spirit work in general is framed, we have a few different schools of thought. We have one which is the devotional school of thought. These are the people who worship spirits. They have like deity work, for example. They work with a god and goddess. Taken to the extreme, you'll even see people who are quote unquote God slaves, where they basically say that they are slaves to the gods and they have to do whatever the gods tell them to do. I'm not going to even tell you how unhealthy that one is. I think that should be pretty obvious. The other extreme you have is the grimoire traditions, where, okay, we're going to call a spirit up and we're going to tell that spirit we want it to do something, and if it doesn't, then we're gonna lay down the angels or whatever else, and basically threaten to smack it around until it does what we want it to do. That's basically the grimoire tradition right there. And then you have the in-between approach, which is my approach, the gray path, I suppose you could say. You want to go with the Jedi side, the Sith, etc., using a Star Wars analogy of sorts, which isn't really applicable here, but hey, we'll run with it anyway. And mine is, let's build collaborative relationships with spirits. Let's, and let's work with them. Now, my friend, he says, well, why even bother building relationship with spirits? What's the point? Like, okay, great. We use them to get some results. That's nice. But why? What else? Like, what is the reason? And I think, it is a good question to ask. It's a hard question to answer, but I think that's why it's worth answering. So I'm going to share with you my take on this, and I want you to keep in mind it really is just my take. So I'm not going to claim I have all the answers. I don't, and your mileage may vary. Some of what I share is in this book, Walking with Spirit. So if you haven't picked it up, I definitely recommend it because I do explore the topic of spirit work and my own perspective on it. And it is a different one because my notion of working with spirits even critiques the way that we tend to anthropomorphize spirits, and we try to frame them into a human context. And we do this because we want to have some form of control over them, some control over the experience, but we don't necessarily want to actually build genuine relationship with them. What does it really even mean to build a relationship with a spirit? Well, I think it's kind of similar to building a relationship with a person. What you put into that relationship is what you'll get out of it. And I think that, relationships will have their ups and downs, hopefully more ups than downs, but there are moments where things go down. And sometimes it's one person, sometimes it's both people. And the same thing I think is true of working with spirits. You have these moments where you're working with a spirit, and some spirits, sometimes you're going to be on the outs with the spirits that you work with. You're not going to feel the love sometimes. And I think it's really important that you are very careful about the commitments that you make when working with spirits. I mean, I would say recently, I worked with the Titan Cronus or Saturn. And you know, I got some great results from that work, but also there was some stuff that came due, and it came due in a really big way in November. I won't say that it was Wally because of Saturn that things came out the way they did in November for me, but I think it certainly played an influential role. And there was a lot of there were lessons to be learned. So I mean, I did. I learned some really good lessons um, around limitations and setting better limitations, right, and being aware of limitations, especially when it comes to myself sometimes. So there you go. But I think a lot of times that's what people don't realize. People have this notion when it comes to relationships with spirits that they want the spirits to be, it's like wanting to be in love with somebody. Like you want to be in love all the time and have it be romantic and great. But sometimes it isn't. Sometimes you fall out of love with somebody for a while. That doesn't mean you still don't want to be with them, but they say or do something and you're just kind of like, what the hell? I love this person. I like this person, but like, what is going on with them? And you fall out of love with them for a bit. I mean, that's a good example, I think. Well, it's kind of the same thing with spirits. Like, okay, here Saturn came along and he did help me out. And so, hey, great. I love Saturn, right? But then all of a sudden things don't go so well. Well, what Saturn is doing is he's holding up a mirror. It's kind of interesting. I was reading this post tonight from one of my friends. She was talking about her partner and talking about the concept of soulmates. And she said that, a soulmate is a lot more than just somebody that like you're connected to and you have to be with. A soulmate is somebody who holds up a mirror and shows you the things about yourself that need to be worked on, like the things that are going to come out. Like when you're in an intense kind of relationship like that, the things that you need to work on and work through will come out as a result of being in that relationship. Well, I think it's a lot like that with the spirits. I mean, Saturn came along and sure, he helped me out and he showed me some things. But even like in the summer when things were quote unquote going better for me, it was still hard to work with him. I mean, when he did the whole peek behind the curtains for me the first time around, late June, I spent the next month basically going a bit crazy in terms of that peek behind the curtains. That was not a fun experience. It was a very eye-opening one. I got a lot out of it. It really helped me see how I limit myself sometimes, but it was not easy. And so like I look at November and I think about like some of the things that happened in November for me, and it was just interesting because I mean Saturn definitely showed up in some of that. And it was again like he held up a mirror and he's like, "Here, Taylor, take a good hard look at yourself and the things that you don't like about yourself." And that's basically what I got. I got a very up and close personal look at myself in some ways and how I sometimes show up and how that's not always an easy thing to deal with. And I mean, speaking as the person who lives with myself, I know it's not easy to live with me, let alone or anything else. So, it was just kind of an interesting thing to see that and to really recognize the effect of certain things and to see Saturn's hand in that and be like, well, here's this relationship where Saturn is basically showing up and showing me the things I don't like about myself. Right now, I've recently started working with Aphrodite again. I worked with Aphrodite a long time ago. I actually have a painting, which is my love painting. And it's like this really beautiful painting. It has the word love in it. It has like a little DNA helix thing going into it. And it was actually something I created years and years ago with Aphrodite's help. It was the one time I really worked with her. But recently, I was doing you'll see this sometime soon. I was doing a interview with Irisanya Moon, and she was talking about her Aphrodite work. I was like, I'm going to pick her book up. And so I've been reading her book on Aphrodite, and I started to think, I need to work with Aphrodite some. I've got some work to do around, love, whatever that is, and all those things. But what's interesting is that my approach to Aphrodite has been a little creative. I ended up doing a wealth magic working where I basically worked around the idea of how Aphrodite could make me more attractive for a specific opportunity I wanted, and at the same time make other people less attractive or repel them from the opportunity. And it worked. I'm not going to talk about it more right now. I kind of want to just wait to let it fully manifest, but it's already starting and I'm excited. So you guys will definitely see slash hear all about that soon enough. But I think that, you know, if we only look toward spirits in terms of what we want when it's convenient for us, this is where we fall into the trap of that anthropomorphization that I was talking about, where we're really only in it for the experience as long as it's convenient for us. And this is what I see with how people work with spirits a lot of the time. It's like, okay, I'm going to work with spirits, and what is it I want? What is it I want? I even had a reminder of this myself this last weekend, because I was getting ready to do this working with this new spirit, and I was like, yeah, I want to get X from the spirit. And it was pointed out to me, well, why don't you just work with the spirit and like build a relationship with it without necessarily trying to get something? And it was an duh moment. I know better. But sometimes you need someone to hold that mirror up. And that's exactly what happened. It was like the mirror was held up, and I'm like, oh, good point. So it just made me sit back and reflect on that. And I'm like, you know what? No, I'm going to revise that. I just want to build relationship with this new spirit. And that's what I did. And I've done that before. I'm not saying I haven't, but I'm just saying, like, it's kind of an interesting thing, like, to even catch myself in that. Like, I'm not, like, the critiques that I'm putting out here are I am by no means exempt from them. Like, I have made the same mistakes. I will make the same mistakes, I'm sure, at some point, where like you go in and you're like, okay, well, what can I get out of this instead of what can I give, right? That whole give get. Well, sometimes you have to give in order to get, and sometimes you can get. I mean, in the situation with Aphrodite, I said to her, look, I need help with this. If you give me this, I will give you this in return. But I was asking for her to give to me first. Well, so far, so good. Things are really looking good toward that given. So, I'm definitely going to be giving in return. But I think a lot of times that you look at this, and I mean, people get caught up in this give/get paradigm with spirit work. And they get caught up in this very humanistic notion of a relationship that's really kind of self-absorbed. And again, speaking as someone who can be self-absorbed sometimes, I'm not exempt from this at all. But I'm okay with it because that's just the way it is sometimes. You have to recognize your shadow for what it is, and then do your best to anticipate it, but at the same time be forgiving of yourself. And I think sometimes it's harder for us to forgive ourselves, really. That's a different topic, though, and we're not going to get into that today. But my point here that I want to get to, and that I am making in my usual roundabout way, circuitous way of kind of exploring all the angles and then getting to the point, is that, like, you're working with the spirit, right? If you're going in with an expectation as to what you're going to get out of it, you are already limiting that relationship, and it becomes a very shallow one. And again, sometimes there's a place for that. I'm not saying that there isn't. Some types of spirits will even welcome that. I mean, I found that, like, with my work with some types of spirits, like, I'm going to say, for example, the goetic demons, that there's definitely been kind of a we're totally fine with a transactional approach to relationships with you. Okay, I can do that too. That's great. I still treat them with respect, and I still focus ultimately on building relationship with them, but I recognize there's a transactional aspect to it. But not all spirits want that. Or if they do, they want it in a more subtle way. And I think that that's really, I guess, the key thing to pay attention to is, like, don't assume that you know what they want or why. And I think humans do have this tendency to make assumptions around the spirits, and part of it is a comfort thing. Well, if I know that the spirits are going to interact this specific way, then I know that, like, I can anticipate it. The problem is it's like trying to anticipate another person. You can anticipate them to a certain degree. You can study them and learn their patterns and behavior, but at some point they're going to surprise you. They're going to smack you upside the head, and you're going to be like, what? And it could be a good surprise. It doesn't have to be a bad one. But my point really is, like, you can't absolutely predict anything with a living being. And I do consider spirits to be living beings. They may not live in the same dimension as us, but that doesn't mean they're not alive. So if we look at our relationship with spirit, like why do we want to build one? I think it really kind of boils down to this. Why you want to build one is because you recognize that there is a benefit beyond just getting a result. That the benefit is that you actually get a mirror held up sometimes for you. You get to see the things that you need to work on, and you get to learn and grow. Now this person mentioned the gallery of magic, and I think it's kind of interesting. Okay, I've talked about this before, so I'm going to talk about it again. I think it's interesting that a lot of the people that come to my work come from the gallery of magic. Because the gallery of magic and like what I do could not be like more dissimilar. Gallery of magic's kind of like, here, do this, and we're not going to explain it. And I'm like, no, let's actually explain and explore and discover the possibilities. So it's kind of an interesting thing. But I think that lack of explanation goes right in even to the spirit work. I mean, I picked up one of their books once, and it was just like, just look at the sigil and connect with the spirit and tell the spirit what you want. And the spirit will be happy to do that for you because that's what the spirit wants to do. It wants to do these things for you. And I'm like, why? And why doesn't the spirit want something in return? Like, oh, because the spirit is a servant of God. Well, that's a very Judeo-Christian approach to things. What if that's not your jam? And what if that's really not the case with the spirit? What if you're just misreading that? It's that lack of critical awareness, I think, that kind of always gets me when it comes to the gallery of magic. But my point being, like, I mean, that's where we have to kind of apply that same critical awareness to our work with spirits. Like, okay, you want to work with a spirit? Great. But why do you want to work with a spirit? Well, I mean, you have to figure that one out on your own. I mean, I'm going to just say that even to my friend who watches this, like, you have to figure that on your own. And part of that is you have to figure it out in relationship with the spirit. Like, if you're trying to figure it out on your own and you haven't really tried to with the spirit, you're missing out on something fundamental. It's like having a relationship with another person, right? You cannot really figure that relationship out without the other person being involved. I mean, you can get your head around some things, but sometimes you're going to go too far with that. Believe me, I know. Like, sometimes you'll think you've got a situation figured out, and all you've really done is step further into it. And, it's like, oops, so wow, now I really got to deal with it. And so, I mean, these are the kinds of things you have to think about. Like, it's not... Relationships are not cut and dried. Whether it's a relationship, a romantic relationship, a friendship, a hate relationship, or whatever, or like, and whether it's with a spirit or another physical in person. I mean, there's just no easy way to categorize relationships. And I think that the problem that my friend here is having, and I'm making a presumption here, but I'm gonna go with it anyway. I think that part of the problem that my friend here is having is that really he's approaching it from that magical transactional mindset instead of approaching it from a relationship perspective. What can I bring to the relationship? Instead of just what can I get from the relationship? I mean, the benefit of a long-term relationship with anything is that long-term relationship brings with it an awareness that you both have of each other. And I say this of working with spirits. Like, I mean, I have this awareness with some spirits where I work with them. Elephant's a great example. I've worked with elephant for ages, like all my life, pretty much. Elephant knows me. It's no surprise that elephant is the really kind of the spirit that represents stability for me. Because elephants, they are pretty stable. They're routines, they do their thing, but they have such big brains and everything else. But they're at the same time, they're really fundamentally, they're stability personified, I think. But again, that's my assumption right there. That's the thing. Like, that's my assumption. And I mean, that assumption can be based on information. It can be based on awareness. Like, okay, based on the information that we have, this seems to be true, and it very well might be. But we should always harbor an element of doubt with that. And so, like, the way that I approach spirit relationships is really like, okay, yes, I want to connect with you. I want to learn from you. I want to work with you. And I recognize that I may not understand you, and I'm okay with that. I will do the best I can. But I recognize that because I'm a human being, I have a limited set of perspectives and awareness, and I bring that to the work. But I could also say the same thing of that spirit, that it's not like the spirit absolutely knows what it's like to be a human. There's a reason that spirits connect with us, and part of it is one of those reasons. There's many reasons, but one of those reasons is because they want, or seemingly want, to have experiences with us that help them understand us and help them evolve. Again, this could be pie in the sky. I mean, that's the thing. Like, people have to be willing to entertain the perspective that maybe sometimes the things that you think you know, you don't know. You have an idea, and based on the evidence that you have access to, this seems to be true. But the thing is that evidence is only as that evidence is only good until another piece of evidence is discovered, and that other piece of evidence contradicts something or provides new light on things or whatever else. So I mean, really what I would say is just be aware of yourself and your own assumptions about what you're bringing into the relationship with the spirit. And at the same time, I would say don't automatically write off a relationship with the spirit. Um, I would say that some of the most pivotal relationships in my life have been from the work that I've done with spirits, and the way those spirits have shown up and at times showing me things. I mean, this work with Saturn right now, Saturn's shown me a lot this year. It's really kind of helped me see, like, how have I limited myself, but also how sometimes I go off the rails. And, like, how do I recognize that? Is it easy work? No. Is it pivotal work? Yes. Is it essential? Oh, you better believe it. So you want to keep that in mind. And that's really all I got to say about this. So thank you for watching the video, and I hope you all have a good rest of your day.